to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. Then, words and deeds of prophetic women and men which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. Wisdom from the world's religions which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. Jewish and Christian teachings which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. Humanist teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit. And finally, spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. We are about midway through a series of sermons on these sources. Have you noticed? We've heard about direct experience and wisdom from the world's religions. Christine will be preaching on loving our neighbors and on earth-centered traditions. In October, I'll tackle those humanist teachings that warn us against idolatries. And today we examine the words and deeds of prophetic women and men. So, we're going to travel back in time a little bit, back to the time of what Christians call the Old Testament, what Jews think of as the Torah, back to ancient Israel. About half of Israel's landscape is desert, like New Mexico. Scrubby bushes, mountains that cast long shadows, change color in the morning light, donkeys, camels. Simple homes that have been drawn up out of the earth with water and dung and dry desert grass. Women preparing food and minding children, children running around, playing, squealing, men tending animals, building, trading, and there, alone in the crowd, in the village square, a prophet. He looks, you think, a bit disconnected from reality. Although it appears to be a normal day, his expression is one of alarm. He's talking and gesturing, but people are averting their eyes. His clothing is rumpled and a bit dirty, but a passerby points out to you, at least the prophet is wearing his clothing today. As he stands there, he delivers a monologue, a rant, you think, about God, people, and justice. Hear this, you who trample upon the needy and bring the poor of the land to an end. The Lord has sworn by the pride of Jacob, surely I will never forget any of their deeds. Shall not the land tremble on this account? He issues dire warnings, but the sins he names seem so typical to us. Taking advantage of the poor. Don't we drive by payday loan businesses every day? Trading money for political favors to the disadvantage of the downtrodden, the second oldest profession in the world. But while most people acclimate to such things, the prophet is afflicted with exquisite sensitivity to suffering. His skin is thin for this world. Maybe you know somebody who's like that, someone who tears up when they read the newspaper. Maybe your natural tendency is to be sensitive and thinner-skinned yourself, but you've managed to make a fragile wall between your heart and the world. To some degree, we have to do this to get through our lives. Doing your job, raising your kids, taking care of your loved ones, buying gas or stopping at the store for your top ramen or your quinoa, just getting out of bed each day. How can you do any of these things if you let the scale of greed and injustice in the world really register in your heart? You can't. But the prophets in the Old Testament did. They let these things register fully. In fact, they couldn't ignore them. For the prophets, To walk along the path through town was to walk on the same crumbly earth that conceals bodies and ruins. To watch people entering the temple was to witness self-serving and inadequate religion in the face of heart-wrecking need. They sell the innocent for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals, laments the prophet Amos. Leaders give judgments for a bribe, priests teach for hire, and prophets divine for money, cries Micah. The prophets Micah refers to are a different kind, mere fortune tellers. But Micah himself and the other prophets of the Old Testament, and even the great modern prophets who we celebrate today, are not fortune tellers, but interpreters. They interpret society. And they do so from the perspective of a God or a higher truth that isn't blown about and remade by the cultural whims of any particular time or place. The symbols and the stories and the names for that God or truth might change, but its essence is always love and compassion. The prophets were compelled, commissioned by God in their experience to wake the people up, but they would have to be bold to get the people's attention. The novelist Flannery O'Connor once said, "To the hard of hearing you shout, and for the almost blind you draw large and startling figures." The prophets employed startling language and images that strike us as bizarre or hysterical. But it's not enough to just be scary. If being a prophet was just about being scary or predicting the future, we could add people like Pat Robertson's name to the list. Yeah. Each year he predicts what's going to happen in the coming year. For 2012, he said, "Expect chaos and paralysis, the disintegration of our country." He also said that God told him who the next president would be, but made him keep it a secret. So we'll just have to wait. Once, when city officials in Orlando decided to fly rainbow flags from lampposts during a gay pride event at Disney World, Robertson warned them, saying, "I don't think I'd be waving those flags in God's face if I were you. A condition like this will bring about the destruction of your nation. It'll bring about terrorist bombs, earthquakes, tornadoes, and possibly a meteor." Yes, a meteor, that's right. I'll tell you, if you throw enough fortune-telling prophecies at a wall, sooner or later, one of them's going to stick. And Robertson's done a good bit of harm, interpreting calamities like 9/11 or the Haitian earthquake, according to his own theology. But terrifying images, an aura of insanity, and public contempt do not a prophet make. So while people like him are concerned with rules and proof texting, prophets call us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and love. I despise your festivals, the God of Israel says through Amos. I reject your offerings. They're only the trappings of religion. You're following the rules, but you're missing the point, he's saying. Your true religion is justice rolling down like water, and righteousness like a mighty stream. The prophets of Israel did not enter into their vocations happily. Their loneliness was difficult. No one likes to be the bearer of unwelcome news. Who wants to be an unbearable extremist? But God has hardwired them to perceive what others are able to ignore. It hurts. "Cursed be the day I was born," says Jeremiah. "Why did I come forth from the womb to see sorrow and spend my days in shame?" There seems to be no choice. Jeremiah goes on, he says, "If I say I will not mention God or speak any more in his name, there is in my heart, as it were, a burning fire, shut up in my bones, and I am weary with holding it in, and I cannot." Eventually, he makes peace with it. "Thy words were found, and I ate them. Thy words became to me a joy, the delight of my heart, for I am called by you." There's satisfaction in answering our soul's calling, even when it costs us. Now, there's another kind of prophecy that we hear about a lot, sometimes from a shaggy guy on a street corner holding a sign, but occasionally from your neighbor or your Uncle Joe or even a politician from time to time, and that's the apocalyptic kind. End times. It's something that comes up pretty regularly in the US, it seems. Over the ages, in fact, there have been so many apocalyptic prophecies, so many claims that an apocalypse is coming or that one is near, that scholars have made a field of study out of it. Remember last year, all the billboards that sprung up around the country predicting that May 21st would be Judgment Day and the earth would be destroyed? Did you see those? Yeah. The Christian radio personality Herrera Continuing said he'd crunched the numbers and interpreted the signs in the Bible and that this was the day. And that was one example of apocalypticism. Say that 5 times fast. What about the Left Behind series of books? Have you heard about those? The best-selling novels about what it will be like for the rest of us when good Christians suddenly disappear to be with Jesus right before the end of the world. Same kind of thing. Now these, like most of the apocalyptic visions we hear about, are linked especially to one prophetic book in the Bible, and that's the one known as the Book of Revelation. The writer of Revelation paints a picture of a future time when evil, which has run rampant on earth, will be defeated by God in a dramatic showdown. There'll be plagues, locusts, wars, famine, demonic horsemen, and satanic beasts. Babylon, which is depicted as a prostitute, and Rome, a monster with 7 heads, will be demolished. 144,000 Christian martyrs will be saved, and others will be left behind to endure the nightmare. Now some, too many, I think, take the book of Revelation quite literally, and they believe this horrific scene is a reality just waiting to break into the world. But Harvard theologian Elizabeth Schussler-Fiorenza sees it differently. She says the book of Revelation must be understood as, wait for it, a poetic rhetorical construction of an alternative symbolic universe that fits its historical rhetorical situation. Got that? No? No. There are some things I do not miss about the academic life. But this is actually a really important idea. What Schussler-Fiorenza is saying, in her way, is basically that the prophecy in Revelations is simply what a particular people needed to hear at their particular time in history. This text was written before Christianity became a state religion, when its believers were a persecuted minority. Back then, Christianity was a radical departure from the rest of society. It disregarded social castes, and it put people in direct relationship with God. It called them to be nonviolent, always turning to the other cheek, but never turning away from their God. And because of this last part, because they wouldn't worship Roman emperors, whose empire represented the kind of greed and idolatry that the ancient prophets had spoken out against, these early Christians were being tortured to death or fed to the lions. It was brutal. So this poetic, rhetorical world in the book of Revelation, this subversive, anti-empire, treasonous piece of poetry that imagined a future in which Rome was a slain beast and their God prevailed, that fired up their courage. It contained symbols that only they would truly understand. And it didn't matter if the prophecy was really physically going to happen. It was true in a spiritual way. At its heart, the book of Revelation is about the notion that just looking around is not enough to understand the deeper meaning of the present. It's a notion that speaks to people in times of angst and worry. And it's why this vivid narrative has carried on for so many centuries. Fast forward. There's a famous poem from 1919 by William Butler Yeats called The Second Coming. He wrote it in the aftermath of World War I, and the poem captures Yeats' despair over the state of the world and his deep feelings of impending doom. He writes, "Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand." And then he asks, "What rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born?" Slouches toward Bethlehem. What evocative language. Like the language of the Bible itself. It turns out that in 1919, Yeats was right to worry. The Roaring Twenties brought a brief respite for many in Western Europe and the US, but then the Great Depression came, and then the Holocaust, and then Vietnam, and Hiroshima, and so much more throughout that century. That century. What a beast. What about that second coming? Are we at the end of this? Rebecca Parker is an ordained United Methodist and Unitarian Universalist minister, and she's the president of Star King School for the Ministry. In our second reading this morning, she says that religious liberals also have their own version of the apocalypse, a vision in which we'll tear down structures and systems of injustice and oppression, and in their place we'll build up a beloved community. In this liberal vision, God does not intervene in dramatic, wrathful ways. The God of liberal religion is more of a companion than a conductor, more of a whisperer than a thunderer. The liberal religious vision is humanistic. All the work is done by human hands. Our prophets of the last century, like Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., led us in realizing huge gains toward that vision. They're not like the biblical prophets, whose main experience seems to be one of public rejection. They spoke in the language of our time and to the people of our time, and they made their vision irresistible to justice-loving people. They earned the trust of masses of followers who were willing to put their lives on the line for the better world that these modern prophets made us believe was possible. This is the vision liberals have had for a long time. We take big steps, and then there are lulls. We keep working toward it tirelessly. Only we do get kind of tired. We have words to describe that: compassion fatigue, burnout. Even though you are a good person, haven't you seen the organizer with the clipboard collecting signatures and donations for some worthy cause on the street corner and shuffled by with your head down or your headphones in, hoping to avoid them? Yeah, me too. That building a better world version of the apocalypse is gentler. It's a good vision, but like the apocalypse, it does put the good part off, way off. Maybe out past the ends of our lifetimes. How many generations will say, "I may not get to the promised land with you, but I've seen it from the mountaintop"? Just when will the turning point be? In the same essay that reading came from, Parker addresses those who are waiting for a big, dramatic apocalypse like the one in Revelation. And she basically says, wait, hold on. Haven't things already gotten bad enough? We are living in a post-slavery, post-Holocaust, post-Vietnam, post-Hiroshima world, she says. We are living in the aftermath of collective violence that has been severe, massive, and traumatic. The scars from slavery, genocide, and meaningless war mark our bodies. We're living in the midst of rainforest burning, the rapid death of species, the growing pollution of the air and water, and new mutations of racism and violence. What if the apocalypse is not ahead of us, but already behind us? Isn't it plausible concerning all that the weary human race has been through? For those whose liberal version of the apocalypse is about tearing down what's in front of us and rebuilding a better world, she affirms that vision. She's part of it. But she wonders also what it's costing us, this perception that the world we have now is temporary, second-rate, and unacceptable, and our tendency to keep our eyes set on that distant horizon. How do we live in this world now? She asks. What is our religious task? Behold all around us the brokenness, the scars, the heart wreckage scattered about in our collective life, but notice also what goodness and kindness and beauty are born and reborn in this world in every conceivable situation. In another book of Parker's, one that she wrote with the former Unitarian Universalist Association president, John Burens, she asks, what if paradise is already here and we are just living as though it weren't? We prepare a garden and green shoots spring up from it, but also from ashes, and also from the crumbly earth that covers ruins and bones. Love flourishes where there is compassion and where we're together with our loved ones. But think how much more power love takes on when the situation is not perfect. When a loved one dies and our love for them passes through the fire of grief and becomes a guiding light in our lives and a source of deep gratitude and blessing. Structures of oppression remain in place, and we've never known the world without some of those. But meanwhile, the Dalai Lama travels through the centers of those structures with his contagious smile, reminding us of the compassion and love that we already have and that we already give in big and small ways, and that we can grow right here, right now, no matter where on the planet we are. Around the world, leaders and everyday people sign Karen Armstrong's charter from compassion, and compassion gains ground. There's poverty and there's capitalism that seems to have become utterly untethered from morality. But meanwhile, the arc of the universe, or at least of the human race, does seem to bend toward justice. Women have more rights than ever before. Slavery is banished in most places. People who used to be voiceless and marginalized, gays, lesbians, the poor, the disabled, Native Americans, immigrants, discover new ways to speak up, and their perspectives are heard and taken seriously by audiences that were not available to them in the past. The whole globe is one community, and people who would never have known of each other's existence in places separated by geography, religion, and political structures make each other's acquaintance on the internet, the virtual web that overlays the real one, and they become allies. These alliances can lead to what Dan McCannon calls prophetic encounters, in which empowering ideas are passed from one person to another. That's how one movement has led to another in the arc of human history. That's how we bend that arc toward justice. We make friends and share ideas. One imagines that the communication age lends itself especially well to this, the information age. Behold the Arab Spring. The point is not to stop wanting an even more just and more compassionate world. We can't stop wanting those things any more than Jeremiah could ignore that fire burning in his heart, pent up in his bones. We are made for love. But the point is to realize that the world we live in is already marked by the presence of what is holy and good, and to allow that reality past the little wall inside us, to give us courage and to feed our souls. Just let the prophets' call for justice, compassion, and love be a source for us in figuring out how to live our lives, but let it also be a source for deep spiritual joy. Let it be a source for deep spiritual joy that just as you are already holy and have all that you need within you to experience deep peace no matter what scars you bear, so what we have been waiting for in the world is already present and is transforming us and it as we try to live prophetic lives. May it be so.